I just love this book. As far as a code book goes, this is probably when it comes to navigation, when it comes to trying to find information, 25 is probably my favorite book in that aspect. And yeah, it kind of makes me a little jealous. An entire book dedicated to just inspection, testing, and maintenance. And the layout is easy to use. The information is so easy to find. Like if you go into 72, you've got to, okay, what about fire alarm am I asking? All right, let me go over. I'm trying to find IT&M. All right, I got to go to that chapter about it. And that's fine. That's easy enough with fire. This is a whole book that's just, hey, here's your inspection testing, and here's the next chapter, and here's what you need to know about inspection. It's so really do like NFPA 25. It's probably my favorite code book, just because of the simplicity of it.
Well, I
Charles, what do
got
you?
two things about NFPA 25. The first one is as a fire alarm technician, I had no idea this ever existed. I tested
Yep.
sprinklers, I did inspections for water flows and tamper switches, had no clue that 25 was even a thing. The second thing I'll say is, and Chris does this extremely well, NFPA 25 goes into some detail about deficiency and impairment.
Yep.
As a fire alarm technician, I made no distinction between the two. There's no definition in NFPA 72 about it. NFPA 25 goes into some detail about what a deficiency is and what an impairment is. And I wish that clarity would transfer over to 72. Chris, I'll throw it back to you for more discussion on that.
Yeah, I mean, it really does. And not only that, you've got with fire alarm, you've got impairment or deficiency, and there's not a lot of clarity between the two of them. And when you go to 25, you've got different types of deficiencies. You've got the impairment. And not only do you have three different types, but it expands on this is what is considered the information on a critical deficiency, a non-critical deficiency, an impairment, and the different types of impairment. You've got defining features, definitions for each of them. And it really does actually give you a lot of, hey, this book is for inspection, testing, maintenance. Like there's actually in Annex A338, a table that tells you exactly how to classify a problem, impairment, non-critical deficiency, or a critical deficiency, and it tells you step by step, like if this is the thing and this is the issue, here's what you have. And we have nothing like that in
Mhm.
72.
Yep. Yeah.
They,
You're absolutely right, Chris. Yeah, pull station issue, and 72 generally defines impairment and deficiency, but we like to talk about in our INT class. Okay, is the pull station is obstructed? Is it an impairment or a deficiency? Well, it all depends. How does the AHJ classify it? Because there is no guidance in 72 on that. And my thing is, well, does the pull station work? Yes, it is, but it's obstructed. Okay, impairment or deficiency. It really, I love the fact that 25 provides that clarity. Another thing I love about 25 is the tables. Oh, the tables are awesome. Such a time saver. Well, the other thing we,
absolutely.
from the 25 perspective, now 25 does cover all types of water based systems, and there are some types of water based systems that have an electrical component. And 25 does defer to 72 for anything electrical. So if there's a smoke detector or a pull station, in a system, a water-based system that has that, for example, a pre-action or deluge system or other types of foam systems have detection, that it does refer you to, excuse me, not defer you to, refer you to 72 for the requirements, or basically mimics the 72 requirements. So it obviously acknowledges the other code exists. The other interesting thing I find about 25 from the fire alarm perspective, and this kind of goes back to what Charles was talking about, is 72 does tell us how to inspect and test sprinkler components, particularly, for example, control valves and water flow devices. And it actually tells us over in the right hand column of the table how to do the work. But those requirements were pulled from 25. What I find interesting, though, is that the intervals don't always line up with 25. So there is, from the fire alarm perspective, okay, what interval do we follow? And my general feeling is, were you a fire alarm tech or a sprinkler tech? If you're a fire alarm tech, you're following 72. If you're a sprinkler tech, you're following 25. Chris, any thoughts on that?
As somebody that has worked both sides of that out in the field, doing both sprinkler inspection and testing, fire alarm inspection and testing, you have that crossover, and it is all from the perspective of what test is this from which trade? Am I doing it from a sprinkler inspection test? Well, then you're going to have to go off of 25 versus if this is we're testing it off the fire alarm side, we're going to go off of 72. And with that in mind, we have crossover with devices. So, for example, your control valve. Your control valve, you have 25's requirements for inspection, and then you have 72's requirements for inspection. You have your testing from 25, your testing from 72. Now, if you are doing it from the perspective of 72, you're not really testing it. You're testing for the circuit and seeing what comes in.
Yep.
But if you're testing it from 25, you're the one that is doing the movements. You are the one that is actually going to be closing or opening that valve to make sure that everything does what it's supposed to do. So it really is into that weird gray area when we have these crossover things. Now, I will say when it comes to certain other systems that have fire alarm equipment, yeah, that equipment's tested based off of 72's requirements.
Yep.
But
So
gray area.
I'm going to throw this out there. This weird gray area is only weird in both of you. I'm talking to you two, both of your weird brains, because
Yes.
as a fire alarm technician out in the field doing work, I have no awareness of 25. That doesn't impact me. I don't consider 25. I have my NFPA 72, and that's what I'm doing, NFPA 72. Because we're code nerds, we realize that 25 exists, but your average technician out there has no clue. Your average fire alarm technician has no clue about that sprinkler stuff. NFPA 13 and NFPA 25 are from a different planet.
Yep, you're absolutely right. And I think, Charles, you bring up an excellent point. Chris, as well, I want to go back to one thing that you mentioned about the electrical side of it, that basically fire alarm people are electricians, sprinkler people are plumbers. Yeah. And that we are looking at different aspects of it. And Chris, you hit it right on the head. We're not concerned when we are testing a control valve supervisory that whether or not the control valve works properly. We are concerned that a signal comes in. When we're testing water flow, we're not concerned that the water flow works properly. We're concerned that we receive a water flow signal, that the panel goes into alarm.
And I'll throw this out, Brian. Does NFPA 72 require that we flow water to test a water flow?
It does.
Does NFPA 72 require that we turn the hand wheel when we test an OS&Y or a PIV?
Yes.
So we have that functional aspect in 72, but the whole point of that is just to verify that we get a signal.
And I can see that Chris wants to correct me on something.
It's not so much correct. And yes, the code does say this is how you do it. It does say that it has to activate within two rotations of the hand wheel. It does say it's not so much that it's more of a PTSD thing from working in the field of don't touch that. You have to make sure that signal comes in within that time. That's not your stuff. Don't touch their stuff. And so yes, the code says it, but like I have this severe PTSD from being out in the field working with other people and they're like, okay, cool, we need to test water flow, and then getting told you're not testing it, you're testing for circuit, don't touch that.
Yeah, the code's very specific. We have to flow water.
Code says water has to flow, and in the jurisdiction that I worked in, you had to go out with a sprinkler tech. You weren't allowed to touch it. So that's where the PTSD comes in, where it's like, code does say it. Yes, code does say it. And there's a little bit of justification to go touch it and do it. But from the specific where your jurisdiction is, you as a technician from fire alarm might not be allowed to touch any of it.
Well, and the code
But-
doesn't say the fire alarm technician has to
Right.
flow water.
It says this has to be done.
Yeah,
And
so
yeah,
if the jurisdiction or company policy requires a sprinkler guy to do that, so be it.
yeah.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
So, Chris, did you
Yeah.
unleash your inner MC hammer and say, "Can't touch this"? No, 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 no. Or your
No,
parachute
I
pants?
released. Whenever we got onto a site with other technicians from other fields, it wasn't the inner MC hammer. It was the inner 5-year-old. Don't touch my stuff. Don't touch my stuff. Don't touch it. That's mine. It's mine. I brought it from home. Don't touch it.
Well, last thing I want to say on this subject, and Charles, you hit it right on the head, is it is a jurisdictional requirement that determines who could touch what. And if the AHJ says fire alarm people don't touch sprinkler stuff, that there it goes. Basically we don't touch it unless we want to get crossways with the AHJ. Charles, you talked about testing the equipment, and obviously the jurisdiction you worked under, or probably more likely the employer you worked under, said you are going to touch this and you are going to do this kind of stuff, and here's how you do it. But yeah, ultimately the AHJ gets to decide who turns that valve or who runs that water, for sure. Awesome. Well, guys, next I'd like to talk about our question from the field. Our question from the field for this edition is students looking in Chapter 26 at remote, central, and proprietary station fire alarm systems and wants to know what the difference is between these systems. Chris, why don't you start us off?
Money.
Money?
Money.
You're absolutely right.
We can get the hardest one out of the way, and the one that a lot of people kind of misinterpret because of terminology, and that's central station.
Yep.
Central station fire alarm system is the least commonly installed across the United States.
Yep.
It's expensive. In order to be a central station fire alarm system, the company that does the installation has to be a listed central station company. The company that's monitoring it has to be a listed central station monitoring company. There are special arrangements for all services. Inspection is done by UL. You have to have runner service. And all of those things tend to start stacking up, and it's very expensive to have that. There are other things that go along with it, but we get this because of the slang terminology that most technicians use for monitoring company. Call central station, put on test, call central station. A lot of people get this little bit of confusion when it comes to this particular topic, because in order to be a central station fire alarm system, every single box has to be checked off.
Yep.
And so there is a lot of confusion on that aspect, but least common, most expensive.
Yep. And I think you hit it right on the head with that slang term. We call it a central station, which is completely okay in the real world. Do you know what they call it in 72? Supervising station.
Yep.
So I mean, there's a differentiation, and that's how they differentiate between a central station fire alarm system and the other types. Charles, which one do you want to talk about?
The one that we all deal with, that's remote station. And from a field perspective, virtually every system we install is going to be a remote station.
Yep.
If you're installing a fire alarm system that communicates, it's most likely a remote station.
Yep.
Your frequency of dealing with the central station is almost zero. In 10 years of field work, I never touched central station fire alarm at all.
Yep.
There's some people who do, but it's so rare. The requirements are in 72. The thing that I think is really important, technicians install remote stations almost always.
If you're doing central station, you're going to know it. And unfortunately, though, if you're doing remote station, as Charles said, a lot of times we misuse that term. And I know there are parts of the country, last time I was in St. Louis, it's been a couple years, I discovered that St. Louis requires central station fire alarm systems. I don't know if that's still the case or not. I haven't been to St. Louis in a few years, but that was the case. So those guys knew exactly what it was, but everywhere else in the country, there's always that confusion. Well, the one I want to talk about by default, since I'm the last guy to talk about this, is proprietary. So proprietary, a common misconception with proprietary means that it uses proprietary equipment. For example, ESD, dealer direct equipment. For example, a proprietary station fire alarm system is a system that's installed with Notifier or Siemens or or Simplex or one of the brands that is an ESD or a dealer direct type of product. And that is not the case. Proprietary refers to single ownership. So the building and the supervising station are under a single ownership. With proprietary, we have the term contiguous and non-contiguous. And that means that it's a single property, like a college campus or a military base or a large corporation. That's contiguous. They're all one property. The organization owns the property and they self-monitor. But there's also non-contiguous, which means that there are properties located around the world. It doesn't even have to be around the country, it can be around the world, and they're reporting to a supervising station that may or may not be on one of those properties. So a good example for proprietary station non-contiguous would be Walmart, for example. Walmart monitors their own fire alarm systems. And they have 3 central stations they report to, and Walmart has stores all over the world, but it is technically a proprietary station fire alarm system. And it does have a similar requirement to what something Chris was talking about with Central is runner service, that runner service is required, which means that somebody is dispatched to the site to basically handle the fire alarm situation. But a runner is not necessarily a technical person as much as somebody who documents and has the ability to reset the fire alarm. And runners have to arrive in 2 hours, so they're certainly not letting the fire department in the building. The fire department's getting in anyway. They got that universal key called a fire axe. They're getting in that building by any means necessary. But the purpose of the runner is to document the condition and to reset the fire alarm. So runners are actually a throwback thing from way back when fire alarm systems required a bit more technical knowledge, and also the fact that way back when, prior to event logs in fire alarm systems, as soon as the fire alarm system got reset, you lost all your indications. Everything new has event logs. We don't worry about that. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for the discussion today. Appreciate all the feedback. I'd like to thank all of our listeners for listening to us. Please remember to like and subscribe, and we'll see you all in the next episode. Have a great day, guys.
Have a good day.
Take care, Brian.